It was funny that right before, we've been getting a lot of flack for too much conversation in the podcast. So this time we had the conversation before the podcast. It might have been the best conversation we actually had. And it probably would have triggered a lot of people because it got at eating donuts during work, the morality of
well, and of course it was you that ate the donut,
right.
Me that fat shamed you for eating the donut, and then
I'm just kidding. Just how it works.
Well, it was an interesting discussion because we were talking about, you and I are very similar in a lot of ways, and then we differ in a lot of ways too. And it was sort of this fun conversation about like how you build in the rewards in your life, whereas I'm more free flowing. And I think for me, it was mostly because growing up, I was so regimented, and I had, as a result, very few people who wanted to be my friend because I was so rigid.
So interesting.
And then I adapted. And the interesting thing,
that's why you now have more friends than I do.
And when I told you that I was an introvert, and you pushed back and said that's not actually true, even though I think my nature is that way. I just fake it so well. Yeah, kind of a fun discussion.
No, it was illuminating. It actually reminded me when you have a good football discussion, it's usually because people with different views on the thing have an open mind, but can present their view in a way that's the other person can take a few things away from it.
Yep.
So we're actually going to try and have that in a second, but let's start with the Hall of Fame game. To me, there were only two things that I was curious about from a football standpoint. The first was how the PI review challenge thing would go.
That elicited a tweet from you that was like this non-joke, which everybody...
Well, Terry McCauley, who is the rules analyst on Sunday Night Football, is a fantastic human being, and we had a conversation earlier that day, and I was just kind of listening to him talk about the review, and it had not been opened to the just totally weird, wonky ways that rule will eventually impact the game, because PI and just pass interference in general is way more than what we think of when, balls up in the air, two guys are going for it, right? There's the downfield screening, there's the RPO stuff, all of which will be impacted by this rule. And in the last 2 minutes, when everything goes to a booth review and you can see every angle, what I'm worried about is that like 80% of the plays need to be reviewed, and we're sitting there for an hour and a half.
Well, we saw that yesterday on that fourth down with Brett Rippon sort of driving them down the field. There was a PI on the fourth down that McCauley said he probably wouldn't have called, probably could have gotten reviewed, didn't, and then ultimately Denver won after a Brett Rippon touchdown pass. So it was interesting because I do think like a lot of things we're going to blow them up. We saw all the hits last year in the preseason that were called as a penalty, almost that never materialized in the regular season. So maybe it's a nothing burger, but it might be like a play or two a game for us to get used to. What was the other thing you were interested in?
Okay, well, real quick before we end that conversation, I want to ask you, do you think next year when we're talking about this that we still have challenge reviews of PI?
Yeah, I think the NFL does a pretty good job of, and it's strange, it's an indictment on the NFL, but also an interesting trait about it. The NFL basically stays in line, with all the time in terms of they don't deviate much, and that comes down to fourth down decisions and all that. It's a negative mostly, but in this particular case, I think the social norm ends up being maintained weirdly through that process. So,
okay, I think there's a decent chance we don't have it next year. To me, this was a reaction to one play, and I actually believe that on the whole the refs do a fantastic job, and that subjectivity is what makes the game fun and exciting. I think it actually helps the league, but I think we either tone it down or get rid of it next year. Okay, next thing, Ted Wynn, friend of the podcast, wrote an article in The Athletic, and it's centered around the will that you impart as a part of the run game. There were a lot of really good quotes in there. You actually pulled a snippet out here, and because you have a wonderful, deep, booming voice, if you want to read a couple of your favorites, I will give you the floor, and then we can discuss.
Sure. So first off, he said, and this is the one I pointed out first, was Kirk Morrison, a former linebacker for the Raiders, I believe. If a team is ripping off 5 and 6 yard gains, you are definitely going to jump up and get there, said Morrison. If you respect the offensive line, you don't want to get there late. A split second could get you beat in terms of an offensive lineman swallowing up a linebacker. The key part about this quote is clearly the fact that we view runs differently than we view passes. We view a successful run as something like a 4 or 5 yard gain, and such a pass is not viewed as successful, even though the yards are yards type of thing. So I thought that was a really interesting tell in this article.
Well, the key word there, I always think it's so fascinating the way people describe certain things in a way that it's really telling. They're trying to do so in, you okay?
Well, the plug-in here is like my computer.
Uh-oh. Okay, well, why don't you fix that? I'm going to keep talking here. What really is illuminating here is the way that he describes these runs. So he says ripping off 5 and 6 yard gains. I mean, ripping off 5 and 6 yard gains is not something you talk about in the pass game. No one is saying, I mean, look at Derek Carr. He's ripping off 5 and 6 yard throws. No one speaks about the pass game that way. And he says swallowing up a linebacker as if, that's the end of the world. And you then flip it to the other side. I'd be curious how he would talk about a cornerback getting beat on a slant. Mm-hmm. I'd be curious what yard threshold we'd have to be ripping off gains at in the passing game. So really this speaks to the double standard. I mean, teams out there are like, they treat 10-yard runs as explosive runs and 15-yard passes as explosive passes, and that's really all. You can end the conversation there with the level of intelligence that some teams and evaluators.
It's all about physicality, right? Because when Michael Thomas throws a cornerback away and catches a 7-yard pass, like, we still don't view that as the most physical thing in the world. We don't view it as abuse. We don't view it as like this imposing your will. But that's totally how it should be viewed. Whereas Morrison is really thinking about, not only is this team gaining yards on you, but they are also like taking away some of your manhood or your will or this all football ethos that we sort of love to espouse. The second quote was, a coach from an analytics-driven team told me that some of the statistics,
which is beautiful to begin with,
used to prove that. I mean, there are smart teams in the NFL. Like, I think we've acknowledged, publicly some of the teams we think are smart, but there are and to underscore it further, there are smart people working for teams that the public doesn't view as smart yet,
that are not analytically driven.
Yeah. But he said, a coach from an analytics-driven team told me that some of the statistics used to prove that the passing game's superiority over the run game could be flawed or don't tell the whole story because they rely on averages that could be swayed by big plays. Big plays still matter, and it should be telling that big plays occur in the passing game more than they do in the run game, but let's avoid this. He believes it's better to look at median statistics when looking at the run game. The idea here is that then that's where it finishes. So, but of course, like, you look at success rate is higher on pass plays. You look at median. The median pass is, I believe, 1/5 of an expected point more than the median run. You also look at big plays happen in both directions. There are more defensive touchdowns that happen on pass plays that happen on run plays, so they sort of even themselves out. And
explosiveness matters. The best offense in the NFL last year was the Kansas City Chiefs. They were explosive.
Yes.
The reason that they were better offense than the Saints, yes? Mm-hmm. The Saints were more consistent. Mm-hmm. They had a higher success rate. No one here is taking the Saints offense over the Chiefs offense for exactly that reason.
Yeah.
So it's such an interesting conversation because people diving, used a phrase similar to this, jumping in front of moving trains to protect something like the running game, when why can't we just move forward? Why can't we view both things in their natural light? Why can't we adapt running backs into a receiving role where they can all of a sudden become more valuable? Like, it doesn't have to be so antagonistic.
I think people are, and it's even smart people, right? Like, so you look at people who are analytics driven, or even like analytics.
We use mathematically driven,
mathematically adjacent. People are trying to dive in front of a bus right now to protect running backs and the sanctity of the position. Whereas, again, like, there are no sacred cows. I think somebody, I can't remember who it was, who tweeted out, said the current analytical dogma. Well, it's like, it's not dogma, right? We're responding to evidence. And so I'd like to propose a sort of a PFF forecast moratorium on discussing running backs, because as we saw last week with Timo, our great colleague, we'll see it a little bit with Kev here, the work we've been doing all around the NFL. The analytics discussion in the NFL is becoming too much about running backs. There are so much more that we can study in the NFL that I think it would be, I don't know whether it be a month or whether it be, we come back in 8 weeks and maybe running backs matter again. But I think we pigeonhole ourselves, and the Mike Taniers of the world criticize us because we're focused just on one.
Just throwing out random people.
Yeah, we're focusing on the easiest thing that analytics has ever uncovered. When in reality, we've done so much more, right? And so I feel like if we only,
I do a great job of it. Yeah. I give two what's about.
So maybe we should have I would say a PFF forecast moratorium on discussing running backs for, let's say, a month.
Yeah. I would love to say that I feel bad for them. I can't feel bad for someone making $5 million a year. So yeah, I'm cool with it. Okay, we're going to do this 10-player draft. So as I understand it, I didn't really look it up.
And per our moratorium, I will not be taking one.
I didn't actually look up the rules, but I believe what it is you pick 10 players to start a franchise with. Mm-hmm. Are there any other rules that I'm forgetting?
Well, and then so there was a little bit of confusion about whether the remaining players on your team were replacement level or average. Let's go with average because I think it makes a better point.
I'm cool with it. So are we going to do a snake draft? How are we going to do this?
Let's do a snake draft. No repeats.
Yeah, right. We're going to actually, no one is going to be able to take the same player as the other person.
Yeah, so let's go ahead. So you let's go ahead and start with you, because I know I sort of want to know who the top, basically I know what position picks 1, 2, and 3 will be in that event.
I did not want the first pick, but all right. You're just going to give me the first pick. Dang it, I don't want the first pick.
Well, because it's going to force you to do something that
I don't want to do.
Yeah, exactly.
That I don't want to do. Man, I really hate doing this. I'm going to take Pat Mahomes.
Right, because
I'm not an idiot.
Mahomes is my guy.
Well, I'm not an idiot.
But it's forcing you to sort of admit something.
No, I legitimately, I had to think about whether I would rather have Pat Mahomes or Baker Mayfield. Mm-hmm. Now, the reason I would have rather had the second pick is because I'd rather have Baker Mayfield in the second pick than Pat Mahomes in the fourth pick, I think.
Yeah, so let me this is a really good question, because I feel like Mayfield's a solid choice, but I'm going to go with Russell Wilson.
Okay, you have 2 picks.
And I snake this back. And then, while I agree with what your next pick is going to be to some degree, I'm going to take DeAndre Hopkins with the 3rd pick.
I love that pick. Can you fill in your stuff?
Yes.
All right, so you've given me the opportunity of a lifetime, and I'm not going to pass up.
I know.
I'm going to take Baker Mayfield.
Right. So I knew, because you said this, I believe you tweeted it out or something, but you were going to take 2 quarterbacks, and I wholeheartedly endorse it. I'm just going to wait a little bit, I think. So, okay, so you have Mayfield.
So I would have only taken Mayfield here.
Okay, so you would have. What was the next?
The reason being is that, so my rationale for taking 2 quarterbacks is very simple, right? I could care less who the rest of my players are. If Pat Mahomes gets injured and I throw out a random guy, it does not matter. So the idea that one of these guys gets injured, or actually that I can play both, right? Like whatever it is, my franchise is set basically no matter what. And I'm only doing it for a guy like Mayfield, who's young enough to be there for the duration of my franchise. So I wouldn't be doing this with Tom Brady, for example, because he'll only be here for 2-3 years. I'm not doing it with Andrew Luck. Is a tough one because I think he's so much further down the road on his career. So I'm only doing this with Mayfield because I know he'll be there for the rest. And the average player thing is important, right? Yep. I get an average corner or average wide receiver. That's so much more important to me than having an average.
Okay, so who's next then?
All right, so you took DeAndre. I am going to go with This is tough. For morality's sake, I'm going to take Odell Beckham Jr.
Morality's sake. Okay.
I can't possibly take Tyreek Hill in this situation.
Yes, but there's an alternative, which I think is probably the second most valuable wide receiver last year. And granted, Beckham was hurt.
Yep.
But the guy that I'm going to take in the third spot is Michael Thomas of New Orleans, to channel my inner Al Michaels. And then I do think Tyreek Hill is like, if you throw out everything off the field, it's the pick here. But I think at this particular point, I need to go some defense, and I'm going to take Jalen Ramsey of the Jacksonville Jaguars. And the only reason I'm taking Ramsey over Stephon Gilmore is because I know that coverage is more unstable. And so Ramsey, relative to his previous season, had a down year. I'm expecting some reversion. I'm expecting some reversion from Gilmore as well. And so even though Gilmore had a far better season a year ago, Ramsey's probably the pick here.
I couldn't agree more. I was going to take Ramsey. I didn't think you were going to take him, which is unfortunate. I'm going to go with corner as well. Man, this is tough. Man. I will go with
this is a great pod right
Marlon Humphreys. Marlon Humphreys.
I like it. Now, anchoring on corner is I agree that corner is like important. This underscores the difficulty of projecting them, right? Yes. Because when quarterback, it wasn't as hard to say, I want a quarterback now. Who's the next best guy? Boom. Corner, it's like I need elite players here, and it's actually unclear. Okay, who's next for you?
Oh, that's right. With two people, the snake draft is a little tricky here. The reason that was tough was because I thought about taking two corners, but I'm not. I'm going to take Derwin James.
I like that. Okay, I'm going to go a little bit. I'm going to complete my offense here.
Nice.
And go, well, maybe not complete my offense, but I'm going to round out my top end offense and go with Travis Kelce of the Kansas City Chiefs as my tight end.
Okay.
Probably the best tight end in the league going right now.
All right.
And after that, I'm going to go. I think I'm going to continue defense, and regression aside, I'm going to go with Stephon Gilmore of the New England Patriots.
Nice.
So I'm at what, 6?
Mm-hmm. And I am going to get 2 picks here. I'm going to stick with defense for the first one. And I'm going to go with Byron Jones.
Okay.
And then we're going to flip the script. I really should just cut the editorial comments. I'm going to go wide receiver. This is tough, but ultimately I'm going to have to go with Mike Evans.
Ooh, Mike Evans of the 0 yards after the catch variety. Okay.
Well, I already have Odell Beckham Jr., so
that's true, and he's great there. That's a good one. Okay, I'm trying to think, because the difficult part is that safety is important, but it's tough to find, and I don't know if many people are going to have this guy on their list, but I'm going to go with Jamal Adams of the Jets, who was the most. I can't remember if he was the most valuable safety last year or he shared it with somebody, but he is somebody that I think in the back end of the secondary provides a lot. I would have taken Derwin James, but you did.
Scooped him up.
And for my 8th pick, I'm going with Bobby Wagner, linebacker, Seattle Seahawks, because now I have the grit on defense.
You have the grit that you needed. Yeah, that's nice. So, you would have taken Derwin there, though?
Yeah, I think so. I think Derwin does more. I think Jamal Adams does what he does very, very, very well.
I agree with you. I'm surprised that you took a tight end so high. I'm not going to take a tight end here. I'm going to go...
Well, there's not that many to choose from.
Right. That's true. I'm going to go wide receiver yet again. And I'm going to go with Julio Jones.
We've gone quite deep without getting into Julio Jones, and I think that's probably,
it's because he's older. But look, I just want to win now.
He also doesn't score touchdowns.
I just want to win now.
He also didn't, apparently, Twitter fight this week, apparently he was MIA in the Super Bowl against the Pats.
True.
He only had 87 yards.
Very true. That's amazing. And then I'm actually going to go... I am going to go corner yet again, and I am going to go with Chris Harris Jr.
You and I are on the same wavelength here. So here's the thing. I think I've lied, okay? Because I said I was going to take 2 quarterbacks, but Russell Wilson has never missed a start. So he's never going to miss a start.
Oh, no.
Here on forward. So I'm going to round out my defense. Well, I'm still deciding, but I know the next player I want is Desmond King of the Los Angeles Chargers to play my slot role / kick returner.
Yep.
And so my secondary is now Ramsey, Gilmore, King, Adams, and some random safety. And my last pick, I know, because the thing here is in the 10th, your 10th best player, I'm able to have what I think is the best edge player because edge is very stable, right? So I actually know who I'm getting. The issue is I actually don't, like, if I go with Khalil Mack, there's age there, right? And honestly, there's not it's just rough there. If I go with Cameron Jordan, I also have the age issue. And then there's a bunch of interior players. If I go with Watt, it's injury. So I actually am going to revert back to what I originally said. I'm going to take a quarterback last. It's going to be Andrew Luck.
Yeah, I can't knock that one. So I'm in a little bit of a quandary here. I really want to take Donald.
We have yet to take Donald.
I just love Aaron Donald. He's awesome. The guy is a physical beast. He plays so darn hard. He's amazing. I also want to take George Kittle because he's George Kittle.
He is. Iowa boy.
And I also sort of want to take another receiver. And I also sort of want to take Kyler Murray. Very, very tough.
If you went 3 quarterbacks, that would be so fire.
I can't go 3 quarterbacks. I'm going to go Aaron Donald.
I'm glad that one of us took him because I think that would have been bad. So
I think he deserves to be taken.
He's the best player in the NFL. While I don't think he moves the needle as much as some people think, he certainly is the best player. So you went the rebound here. You went Mahomes, Mayfield, Beckham, Marlon Humphrey, Derwin James, Byron Jones, Mike Evans, Julio Jones, Chris Harris Jr., Aaron Donald. I went Russell Wilson, DeAndre Hopkins, Michael Thomas, Jalen Ramsey, Travis Kelce, Stephon Gilmore, Jamal Adams, Bobby Wagner, Desmond King, Andrew Luck. I think they're solid picks.
Pretty decent 10 to start with. The only place that we really differed was that you took a linebacker
and a tight end.
And a tight end, and I took an interior player.
The thing with the tight end with Kelce is that he's different than most tight ends in that he's split out a lot, and he's not just split out to basketball player. He's a legitimate yard after the catch.
No, he's
screen
fantastic.
player. I think he has a lot. He's a different tight end, and I think that he adds enough there where he can be extremely valuable for me.
I like my team better. You like your team better, I assume. That's the point of this whole thing. That was a lot of fun, though.
2 Seahawks. The only 2 Seahawks worthy of the selections, by the way.
So I took quarterbacks at 1 and 2 with Mahomes and Mayfield. You ended up with Wilson and Luck. I think having seen who you ended up with, I was prudent to go with them 1 and 2. You have 2 guys who are older, who have a ton of wear and tear. I think in 6 years, my team is still a dynasty, and you are looking for another quarterback.
What is the probability that both are not good, though? Like, I agree with you to some extent that the probability that one isn't worthy of playing.
Maybe 6 is a little low.
Yeah.
Easily within 10 years.
Because I'm looking at the probability of A or B being pretty high.
I mean, Luck is injured again. The guy's been injured every year. So,
but Russell Wilson is a compact. He's like the Duggar.
My team is going to be dominant for 20 years. All right, we're moving on. The Houston Texans, a team with 1 player picked in our draft. Let's go through this rather quickly here. Actually, we're making decent time. Texans are an interesting team. They started off the year last year pretty woefully. They rebounded with a couple of big wins. They beat the Indianapolis Colts in a game that we will never forget because we had the Colts -1 in that game. They ended up getting out to just a horrific start. Multiple touchdowns given up by the Colts offense. It was an absolute disaster. And then, of course, they come back. Frank Reich goes for it on a 4th and 4. They don't have T.Y. Hilton at that point. He throws a hitch route to a receiver whose name we don't remember at this point. And the rest is history. But they are such an interesting team because there were people talking about them to win the Super Bowl, after like week 10. And then they kind of just sort of, fell off the map.
Yeah, I mean, because the thing with the Texans, and we like their under at 8.5, and that looked good at first, and
then really bad.
And ultimately, our model did well on them. We were 7-2 last year and printed picks on Houston. The only time we backed them, they not only covered, but beat Jacksonville plus 5.5 on the road. Basically, got Bortles benched, I believe. But the thing about it was that we miscalculated, which is not true this year, was they had one of the easiest schedules in the NFL. And so you look at their schedule and the quarterbacks that they ended up facing during that time, and they were an easy fade by the time it came to the playoffs. Like they played, Nathan Peterman / Josh Allen. They played Blaine Gabbert. They lost to Blaine Gabbert. They played Eli Manning. They lost Eli Manning at home. They played Dallas when Dallas didn't have Amari Cooper and kind of were sort of like, finding their way. They played Jacksonville twice. They played Indy before Indy sort of had things figured out. Then they went and lost to them twice at home, both times. And so it was one of those things where, and they lost to a backup quarterback in Nick Foles too on the road in Philadelphia. So it was a season where they got a lot of luck associated with it, and then they had probably one of the best receiver seasons we're ever going to see in DeAndre Hopkins, who did not drop a pass a season ago. He had 46 catchable but inaccurate passes thrown in his direction. He was the most valuable wide receiver and most valuable non-quarterback in the NFL by a mile, and that overcame quite a bit.
I want to spin it forward because I think they're a very interesting team. Deshaun Watson was a guy who did a lot of things worse than the results ended up. In his rookie season, had a lot of turnover-worthy plays that ended up not turning into turnovers, a lot of screen passes that ended up turning into touchdowns. And last year, we saw a big improvement in his play. He was really good at that intermediate level, 131 passer rating and that 10 to 19 yard depth, which is the area of the field that the great ones just continually take advantage of. That middle, over the middle of the field, 10 to 19 yards. It's where you have to win, and he certainly did. He's a guy with his mobility that really opens up a lot of things. But I think he'll always kind of be a guy whose positive throw rate is going to be higher than his negative, avoiding negatives. It's just he's going to take some chances, and you probably can live with that because of the positives that he brings your team. So having seen him last year, having seen DeAndre Hopkins, how far away are they from contending for a Super Bowl?
Well, first off, they have the toughest schedule in the NFL this year per PFF ELO.
But I'm not even talking about this year. I just mean like in general. Like, do you think, okay, schedule agnostically, the next 2 to 3 years, next 2 to 5 years, what is going to get them into Super Bowl contention?
Well, I think they need a general manager, which is like an important thing, which is sort of hanging them up on some of the issues that they have. Like J.J. Watt is a player who's terrific when he's on the field, but hasn't been able to maintain health necessarily the whole time. Jadeveon Clowney's holding out. They can't seem to find the right balance at cornerback. Right, Kevin Johnson was a bad draft pick. Aaron Colvin last season was brought in to play the slot. Wasn't the greatest thing in the world. The question is, like, I think last season they got by a lot on sort of Hopkins and Watson, their offensive line terrible, right? So they overcame a lot because of the outrageous talent of these two players. My question is Bill O'Brien, no GM, a defense that's kind of not trending in the wrong direction, but an offense with a lot of talent. How far can that? And I just think the AFC is so stacked right now that it's going to be tough for them. I think the Colts in their own division are moving in the right direction. Kansas City, obviously, Los Angeles, New England's still going to be around. One of those teams in the AFC East will eventually be good, like Buffalo or New York with a young quarterback. And so it's just a question of, like, are they being squeezed out here when other teams are sort of more complete than they are? And in my opinion, I don't think that they're going to be a contender anytime soon.
It's interesting. I might be a little more bullish on them simply because I think the offense really has suffered because of injury and just atrocious offensive line play. Mm-hmm. And those things revert to the mean, and I think their offense can be easily top 10, potentially top 5, and I think any top 5 offense can compete in a random season because of the perturbations that are, to use a word that you like,
perturbation,
are just so frequent on the defensive side of the ball. But I would agree with you. Their defense has been such a disaster. Their offensive line has been such a disaster, and they've been so injury riddled at the skill position that it's hard to see Deshaun Watson, DeAndre Hopkins, and Bill O'Brien's offensive genius being able to outweigh all of those things when so many other teams are complete.
Well, because my thing is, like, I agree with everything you're saying. Like, you can overcome these things. You can, when you have Kiki Kuti is somebody who I think is going to be a great player. Will Fuller is somebody who can't stay healthy, but when he's on the field, ends up being dynamite all the time, et cetera, et cetera. My stance, though, is that they've already done this, right? They've already oozed all the toothpaste out of the tube, if you will. And the question then becomes, like, what's the next pivot for them? And I just don't see it because you've already pivoted to drafting a great quarterback. They already have the league's best receiver. And, what now?
Well, I'm worried a little bit about who they drafted. Tackles from Alabama State and Northern Illinois. Just saying that.
Well, and if you were a tackle-needy team in the draft, it was the year for you. And if you messed it up, like you were Minnesota, for example, and you draft a center at 18, or, the board fell right? Yeah. Like, a lot of those tackles made it into the 20s, and some of these teams picked guys that I'm not sure I would,
risked it all for.
Yeah, I would have risked it all for, exactly.
In a spot where you just can't. Here's the thing. We talk about this all the time. Being average at tackle is just not being bad is so important that trying to hit the home run feels like just a terrible, terrible, terrible decision with tackle. You just can't have TJ Clemmings over there literally being spun in circles trying to pass protect. So you've got to, if I'm looking at projecting college to pro, I'm way less worried about the tails, way more worried about what the center of the distribution
and that's why we like Dalton Reiser so much, and we saw him last night graded well, I think, in his first...
they could have had a Dalton Reiser, right? And I think teams just get scared.
And they're so afraid, like they want the next Tyron Smith.
Got to have the next Tyron Smith.
Which honestly, and again, this gets back to our 10 players we just drafted. We didn't take any offensive linemen because if you have an offensive lineman of 5 average players, you're fine. You are, and in fact, you're better than most teams.
We actually should have talked about that. Neither of us. That was my fault. We should have talked about the fact that neither of us took an offensive lineman.
Well, it was part of the parameters at the beginning.
Right. I was going to say, for me, it was simply because we went average players at all their positions. If we went replacement level at all of their positions, how many of those picks do you think you would have used on an offensive lineman?
2. I would have taken 2 tackles. Yeah. And I think center is certainly important, but I would have in no universe ever taken a guard.
Yep, I'm there with you. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the future for the Houston Texans here.
So we have. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so we have them at about 7.75 wins, which is, again, mostly a product of the fact that they are one of the, they have the toughest schedule in the NFL. If you look at Vegas, win totals for them are 8. So an 8 flat, minus 110 on both sides. So I think the market is sort of keen to this as well. Frankly, we're a little lower on the Indianapolis Colts than others, and so that's kind of like where this. Yeah, I think people are maybe lower on Houston because they're higher on Indy, but we're just lower on Houston because they just have a tough road. Yeah,
I'm super low on the rest of the teams in their division, other than the ones you just spoke about, Indy and Houston, though. So 8 feels right. I'm not, super excited about either the under or the over on that, but they're a team where that is true, but there's also high variance, right? You can certainly see everything clicking, and they have the pieces where if all of those ancillary components click, they have the quarterback and the offense to take advantage of it.
Well, because if you look at, for example, their prop to make the playoffs on BetOnline, for example, is plus 150. The no is minus 170. That gets you a little bit more towards this idea of the variance, right? We actually have them with about a 1/3 chance to make the playoffs. So even then, like we obviously don't like that bet. But, once you start getting further down the division, it gets down to Tennessee, where we like Tennessee's under win total. But we also think there's probably some value in their division title prop because so much is being gathered in on the Indianapolis Colts. I have to find where it is currently, but it's essentially, they're the AFC South. Yeah, so the Colts are minus 125, and whereas Houston's plus 275. So you're talking about a break-even rate of about 25 to 30% there, and that's kind of like more in line with what we would sort of say is in the ballpark if you're inclined to want to bet Houston something positive in their regard.
They're an interesting team for sure. Their fans super passionate. Houston, good spot. They're nice people.
Well, the history of the Houston Oilers, right? Where when free agency started in -93, Bud Adams, who was the owner of Houston, said that it was the spring after they lost that 33-point lead to Buffalo or whatever. Yep. And he said, if you don't win a Super Bowl this year, I'm breaking this team up. I have not prepared for the cap at all. He broke the team up after that, traded Warren Moon to the Vikings, and they basically set records for low attendance for like 3 years, then moved to Tennessee and became the Titans. So now that they got a team back, I think that this is, I think it's a pretty stable franchise in terms of their fan base and stuff. Need a GM, though.
Ended up working out for Tennessee as well.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, they're decent spot now.
They should give the Texans the right to wear the Oilers' old uniforms, so that to me is a little bit of a shabby thing.
All righty, let's close it out. Stories from the Cincy Y. I've had a couple. Do you have any that you want to share before I launch into my...
Well, the last couple of weeks we've been playing basketball, and I've gotten to play against Steve Palazzolo. And while I am tall, I'm 6'2.5", 6'3". Ooh. Steve is about 6'10". And so covering Steve is an interesting one because you have to play games down there. And can
we give the listeners, real quick, a NBA comp? Who's your favorite NBA comp for Steve Palazzolo?
Well, you said Vlade Divac, and I laughed,
which is great, right?
Yeah. I compared it today to so somebody's like, you're guarding Steve. I'm like, yeah, it's like Sam Mitchell guarding Dirk. But no, Steve's got a solid jumper.
He's not Dirk.
No. But he's not horrible. He's got decent touch under the basket.
He's slow, but he hustles.
He does, and he
is
glides.
He is Vlad.
Yeah, he's Vlad. Yeah,
he's got a little.
Go ahead. Who is the I was going to say Eric Dampier, but
Yeah, but Eric Dampier is a good one. Eric Dampier, Warrior legend. Yeah, that's a very good one. Okay, continue your story. Sorry.
Yeah, so, I mean, the thing about it is when you guard somebody 7 inches taller than you, you have to be scrappy. Mm-hmm. And today I think I got Steve going a little bit.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, he was.
Let me guess. He took you to
It's
the
sort
post.
of like the one time I stole the ball from you, and you went from playing like 80% to playing 100%. In response to that, it sort of was that. It's somebody like kind of, if you block a 6'10" guy, then he gets freaked out. You steal a ball from a good ball handler, they get, that was Steve today. He got blocked by me, and then he kind of got mad.
I can commiserate, kind of, because, well, not commiserate with him, but commiserate with you. Because when you play, you like to take people into the post because it's where
Establish
you have
the
an
run.
advantage. And I put up with it.
You do.
And I have never called an offensive foul because I don't believe in them morally.
And I've never infracted either.
Right.
Yeah.
Never. But I get physical. You have to.
You have to.
If you go into the post and you're like, oh, you know what? I'm just trying to draw a foul
I'm just going to like put my armpit in this guy's face.
You're playing pickup. Get over yourself. Okay. Here is the story that I have. This comes from the gym at my apartment. So it's not a great gym, but I am not a professional athlete. I just need a little space, need some, the bare minimum equipment I can get a workout in. So I go and use that gym every evening. And people do a variety of things there. There are people that do like weird yoga routines in there. It's by no means a place that I would ever deign suitable to lay on the ground for long periods of time. And as someone that does yoga, I would never in a million years do yoga in this place.
As somebody who wipes down the seat in front of them on the airplane.
Yeah, I do yoga in my apartment, and I can clean that. I can keep that clean. Anyways, so that's not even close to the weirdest thing, though, that I've seen in there. And the other day, I walk in, and it's one of those gyms where the only thing that gives noise is the TVs. So if all the TVs have been muted or turned off, it's silent. And I love when it's silent because it's so funny because people put their headphones in and they sort of don't hear the sounds that they make, right? And I don't work out with headphones because I don't want to ruin the head. I feel like I'm just going to sweat and ruin the headphones. So it's always funny to hear people like eventually talk to themselves or whatever. I come in one day and there's this guy and he's staring at himself in the mirror and he's doing like the slowest curls in the world. And all of a sudden I realize that he's talking. He's having a phone conversation with, I don't know, a parent, a grandmother, someone. But it's not like a hurried conversation like, hey, I'm working out, I've got to finish this conversation. It is the most casual conversation that I have ever heard. He's discussing work. He's talking about what he did this weekend. We're about 5 minutes into the conversation. He's put weights back. He's gotten other weights. He's doing tricep extensions at this point. Obviously has no trouble conversing. And he's got like, I'm never someone to make fun of people for using like light weights because, wherever you're at. But he's using weights that are so light that he can continue this conversation and it cracked me up because I don't understand the point of someone going to the gym and then just literally like wasting their time. Mm-hmm. Like it's not that enjoyable of an experience. So you're like, I just want to hang out in this beautiful gym. So I just thought that was ridiculous.
Yeah, that's the thing is like you when you're on the treadmill or something and the person next to you is like, it was like Adam Schefter at the combine, just grinding it out just fast enough to get a pump in,
just getting a power walk,
but also like able
incline.
to like find his sources and like all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, so when you go to the gym, don't talk to someone on the phone. If you need to talk to someone on the phone, tell them you have to work out and hang out.
It's important. It's sacred.
Yep, that's my words for you. We'll be back next week. We have more preseason to talk about next week, and we won't talk about any of it.
Okay, even the bets.
See you guys later.